Right, though Election Day is next Tuesday, we may not actually find out who the winner is until much later. We wanted to know, though, if there are any signs or trends to watch for to give us an idea of what may happen that day. And for that, Anchor Summer Dash spoke with Dr. Marco Gorman, a political science professor at Maryville College.
Usually we have to wait until at least late in the evening, our time, like 11 p.m. midnight, because that will have to be until the very earliest that all the states, except for Alaska and Hawaii, have closed their polls. And so that's the first moment where some of the states from East Coast to West Coast can finally start to kind of, some of the news media can make their calls, so to speak, in terms of which state might be going for either President Trump or Vice President Biden. And so really I'm going to be at the earliest that. And given the fact that there are so many, literally tens of millions of outstanding mail-in ballots out there, and the fact that more than a couple of the states won't be actually doing the process of counting them until Election Day, until Tuesday, it's just a process that can't be done quickly. And so there's a chance at minimum it'll go into the wee hours the next morning, if not a little bit later.
And those mail-in ballots this year, I would imagine the pandemic has a lot to do with this. How has that impacted when we're going to see those results?
Yes, it really depends a lot of it in terms of like which states, what the rules are. One of the first issues is the fact is just making sure that the people who are requesting a mail-in or an absentee ballot receive them, and then their ability to, I guess that's for lack of a better word, not sit on that, to actually complete it quickly, complete it as a clean ballot, and we can chat about that for a minute, as a clean ballot, and then send it off into the mail. And the idea there is the fact that the Post Office, the United States Postal Service, and some of the private mail entities understand these are very important, but they can only go at the rate that they can go in terms of their staffing. And so really a lot of folks, both on the left and the right, are encouraging people to get your absentee ballots in as quickly as possible, just to kind of remove that gap, like, oh dear, did it actually make it on time? From what I've heard, as long as you can get your mail-in ballot to a Tennessee election commission on your address by Election Day, it will count. And so there's still a few more days, but you need to get that in.
Absolutely, and I know that is a concern for very many people who have voted absentee and mailed that in. Will it get there? Of course, the post office has been slammed too, so there's that factor. Now, as for Tennessee, we are a red state. Of course, there are pockets of blue, but do you foresee Tennessee going any new direction? Do you see more blue popping up, or is this going to be what we generally expect with a pretty Republican sweep here?
I think it will be mostly Republican. This is a more red state than many other states, and including the Southeast. And so I think you'll see, in terms of President Trump being successful, at least in the state of Tennessee, on election night. And I think early polling suggests that the Tennessee Senate race, the U.S. Senate race, will go Republican. And so you can see that in terms of predictable. I believe there are races here, even in just the Knox County, the Tennessee Valley area, in terms of whether it's whether like outer West Knoxville or in the city, that you're starting to see, I guess, some pockets of blue. One thing that I do think is going to be an indicator on election night will be the margin of victory for President Trump. He won handily in 2016, or I think it was like 62-36. Hillary Clinton got in the 30s. What early polling is suggesting is that Joe Biden might get into the 40s. And what I mean by that, get 40% of the popular vote. It still means that President Trump will have a commanding win in Tennessee. But if the margin is less, that might be one of those first indicators that suggests that President Trump's support might not be as strong as it was in 2016. And that might be that phrase, the canary in the coal mine, suggesting that he might have a journey. And so some folks are looking to see what the turnout will be like in Tennessee. Is that an indicator of strong Trump support, or possibly some inroads by Biden and the Democrats?
Tell you what, it's going to be an interesting day on November 3rd, that is for sure. Again, Election Day is next Tuesday, and you can find polling locations and take a look at a sample ballot on our website, WATE.com. All you have to do is click on your local election headquarters under the News tab.